my Christian friends, through our Lord and Savior Jesus. Amen. We finish up my series on facing your giants, and today we're going to take our Goliath down, okay? A little brief introduction. He vies for that bedside position next to where you wake, hoping to be the first voice you hear that rattles around in your head. He wants to affect your first waking thoughts, awaking you to words of worry or thoughts of some coming stress that you will face that day. If you dread the day even before you begin, mark these words down. Your giant has just been at your bedside, and he will try to go with you throughout the day. Had to wrestle giants like that? He will certainly try to remind you, you ain't got what it takes, folks. You just can't make it. You come from a long line of losers. So why don't you just give up now? Save the effort. Throw in the towel before you get out of bed. Remember, about 4 weeks ago, that's how we started this series with Goliath. Taunting, teasing, boasting against David and his God. And Satan tries to do that in your life and mine every single day. Unfortunately, Goliaths still roam our world, don't they? Only today our Goliaths are not 9 feet tall and wielding weapons of steel. No. Today our Goliaths are debt, depression, disaster, dialysis, danger, deceit, disease, all the big D's in your life and mine. But you know what David knew. You sing it every Sunday. And you can do what David did. Because the power is not yours. The power comes from above. So with David, you're going to pick up 5 stones. And with them, you're going to make 5 decisions today and for the rest of your life. So first, the stone of the past. Generally, we talk about the past and we don't want to deal on the past and so forth. But today I'm going to tell you something a little different. Someone has said a good memory makes heroes. A bad memory makes wimps. What I mean by that is simply as Christians, we are told constantly throughout Scripture, and I'll give you one text, remember God's marvelous works which He has done. 1 Chronicles 16. When we forget the glories that God has brought us through in our past, we end up becoming wimps. We are to have a catalog of God's successes in our minds and at our hands all the time. A list of His world records that we can pull out an instant notice and say, wait a minute, God took care of me there. God took care of me in that situation. He was with me and helped me stand in that particular stress and strain. God will do that today. So when our Goliaths show their faces, we can remember all of God's faithfulness to you and to me. I wonder how many times David remembered his victory over Goliath. Would he not have said, wow, what a day, Look how the Lord brought me success and victory. I mean, prior to standing up to Goliath, David remembered how God had given him strength over a lion and bear. In fact, he says that to Saul. When Saul says, well, you can't fight this guy. But David said, wait a minute. I'm not fighting him. God is. And God protected me against a lion and a bear. He remembered the past, did he not? That memory of David's begged the question, would God do the same against Goliath today? Of course, David went with the affirmative. He will. I'm confident of that. And he went out. So write today's worries in the sand and let the wind obliterate those words. But, my friends, chisel yesterday's victories in stone, so you can always remember them and keep them handy. Pick up the stone of the past, and do so, John Paul II once said, Do not abandon yourselves to despair. We are Easter people, and the hallelujah is our song. That's remembering the past victories. And shouldn't Easter constantly remind us of what God can do in such a tragic circumstances that appear to be no end in Good Friday? He turns that into the joys of Easter in resurrecting His Son. God can do that in your life and mine. Second, pick up the stone of prayer. Do you notice that before David went up to meet Goliath, he bowed low to pick up the stone? Kind of illustrative of this line, to stand up against the world, you must first kneel before God. The Apostle Paul wrote it this way: praying always with all prayer and supplication in the Spirit, being watchful to this end with all perseverance. How you and I can persevere under all the tragedies that occur in your life and mine? Prayer, prayer, prayer. That's the stone David picked up. When Saul's soldiers tried to capture David, he turned toward God and he prayed, "You have been my defense," remember the past, "and refuge in the day of my trouble." As much to say, you're going to see me through it today as well. So how do you survive a fugitive life like David? Living in caves, running for his life. David did it with prayers like this: "Be good to me, O God. I've run to you for dear life. I'm hiding under your wings until this storm blows over." What a wonderful prayer. What a wonderful statement of the confidence of God. He saved me in the past. He will do so today and in the future as well. So when David saturated his mind with God, he stood tall. That's great. When he didn't, he flopped down like a wet noodle. Maybe like some of the spaghetti noodles you're going to eat a little bit later, right? Think about that. What kind of backbone does that spaghetti noodle got? Not much at all. Do you think David spent much time in prayer the night he seduced Bathsheba? Probably not so much. Or how about, did he write a psalm the day he murdered Uriah, Bathsheba's wife? Oh, David didn't actually do the sword himself, but he arranged for it to happen. But I don't think David was writing a psalm that night. You? See, Isaiah says it this way: God will keep you in perfect peace, whose mind is stayed on God. God doesn't just promise peace. He promises perfect peace. The kind of peace Jesus says the world has no knowledge of. The world can't give you this peace. You can be in a storm blowing all over the place and be at that peaceful place inside. But question, to whom does that perfect peace get? To those whose minds are fixed on God. Fix your mind on God, and His blessing will be the peace the world doesn't understand. Invite God to help. Pick up that that stone of prayer, and God will provide you with peace that surpasses all understanding. Third, the stone of priority. When David first fought Goliath, you remember his highest priority, his purpose and goal in that whole conflict? You might say, well, to defeat Goliath. No, I don't think that was a secondary goal. You know what David's real goal and priority was? It was God's reputation. David jealously guarded it. And no one was going to defame his God, much less Goliath or the Philistines. David fought with this goal in mind. Notice these words: that all the earth may know there is a God in Israel. Defeating Goliath was secondary. That would happen. But ultimately, God is going to receive the glory, God is going to receive the honor, and people will start to believe there's a God alive in Israel. You see, David saw Goliath as a chance for God to show up and make a name for himself. This God is mightier than any giant. Did David know he would get through the battle alive? There was no guarantees, right? Not at all. Was he willing to even give up his life for the reputation of God, regardless of the outcome? Absolutely. What if you looked at your giants that way? You know, the cancer I was diagnosed with a few months ago, is it not also God's chance to flex his healing muscles in my life? Absolutely, right? Your sin that you've been struggling with, is that not also God's opportunity to showcase his grace, to assure you forgiveness and his love are real in your life? Absolutely. For that particular difficulty that your family is struggling with, can that become a billboard for God's power and faithfulness? Look what God has done in my family. You see, every one of our struggles can become God's canvas on which he can display his power and love. He's just waiting for someone to say, God, show yourself in my life. And he will. How? I don't know. But God will. And people will respond saying, wow, you really have a God. You really have a faith. You really understand his power and love. God wants to write those words on your life, now and throughout your life. Fourth, there's a stone of passion. David did not run from the Goliath, the giant, but rather he ran toward him. I'm sure that day there wouldn't be a whole lot of people that would have bet on David if that was the case. Certainly not the Philistines. They were mocking him. Probably not Saul and his army, for sure, because they tried to give him some other weaponry of war and say, you can't go out there by yourself with just a slingshot, for crying out loud. And maybe not even David's brothers, who probably tried to talk him out of doing this. I mean, obviously, family and kin want to keep my brother safe, right? Don't do this, David. But God did. God was betting on David, because God knew what he would do through David. We can do the same. What good has it done for you to ponder and worry over the giants in your life? You've stared down your giant so long you could probably count the hairs on his chest. Right? You know him individually and personally. And what good has that brought you? Has that lowered the anxiety level in your life? Has that removed the giant? Has that brought defeat of the giant and victory to you? I mean, listening hurts will never heal them. It just fans our depression. Itemizing problems won't solve them. Categorizing difficulties won't remove them. We all make lists of all the struggles we have, and we keep poring over these lists. Does that make a difference, folks? Does that lift your spirits? Give you that personal energy to walk vehemently into battle against those giants? Or does that already squash your reserve and your resolve? David took down his giant because he was pumped about the Lord. St. Paul wrote it this way: if God is for us, who can be against us? We sang that a little while ago. Did you get pumped? Not because of your own strength or your own tenacity, but rather about what God can do in your life and through your life, becoming a billboard for his glory and honor? You get pumped about that? We can get pumped because God is for us. And if God is for us, we just got done singing, what or who dare stand against us? No one. And nothing. You see, that's what Lent and Easter are all about. That past event of Easter victory should be carried into every struggle and giant we face. This is what God did. God can still do that that today. All we have to do is give him an opportunity. Become that walking billboard for God to work his miracles of victory, and that's what will happen. The world did all it could to Jesus. Mocked him, beat him, crucified him, killed him, and then buried him. The world thought it was done with Jesus. God wasn't done. And he isn't with us either. List your struggles. Face your giants. Recount your stresses and strains. What can the world do to you that it already didn't do to Jesus? And yet he rose victoriously on Easter Sunday. Could the world keep him down? Absolutely not. And what happened? You know what happened. We need to bring that into today's life. He rose from the dead. The miracle of Easter can be your life and mine as well. If God is for us, who dare be against us? The fifth stone, the stone of persistence. If you ever wonder if David was so confident in God, why he picked up 5 stones? Did you know that Goliath had 4 huge relatives? I'm sure when Jamie was preparing the reading today, he said, I have no idea why Pastor has 2 Samuel 21. That's the message today, for crying out loud. You can hardly read it, let alone make sense of it. But the key there in that verse is the word Rapha. It's transliterated, and it means giant. Now watch what happens. In 2 Samuel 21, there is a guy by the name of Ishbi-Bana, one of the sons of Rapha, the text says. Strike out that word Rapha and put in the word giant. This was a son of Goliath. And like father, guess how big he was? In 2 Samuel 21:18, we read about a guy by the name of Seth, one of the descendants of the giant. We don't know if son or what, but a descendant of Goliath nonetheless. Huge. In 2 Samuel 21:19, we hear about the brother of Goliath, who had a spear with a shaft like a weaver's rod. He was just as big as his brother, Goliath. Then finally, in 2 Samuel 21, there's a huge man whose name we don't get. Had 6 fingers in each hand and 6 toes in each foot. Wow! He was also a descendant of Rapha, giant. So why did David take 5 stones? Because Goliath had 4 relatives the size of Tyrannosaurus Rex. That's why. Okay? Now, did David know for sure they were going to meet these other yokels later? No, I'm sure not. But David also knew that by taking down Goliath, his family, whatever kin he had, would be there to defend him at some point in time in his life. And 2 Samuel 21 is that event. So David was ready to empty his chambers, so to speak, if that's what it took. You and I are to imitate David. Never give up. One prayer might not be enough. That's okay. Keep praying. You might get knocked down a time or 2, but don't quit. Get back up. Finally, just keep loading those prayers to God. A great illustration for our prayer life ought to be a machine gun. You don't just shoot one bullet. You shoot a whole pile of them. Our prayers ought to be like that. A persistent prayer. A machine gun kind of prayer. So, brief conclusion. David took 5 stones. I think made 5 decisions, the same we just looked at here today. He viewed the past and God's victories there. He prayed to the Lord. He had his priorities right. He had a passion for God, and he was persistent. You and I can do the same. Pick up 5 sentences and fight your giants. So, questions or comments? Please, Mark.
How did David eventually die? He died in battle?
He died of old age. He did not die in battle. As you heard in the text, the soldiers, his army, refused for him to lead them in battle from that point on. Because he was already aged and exhausted. And they said, you ain't coming again. So he died in old age in Jerusalem. Okay. Just prior, interestingly enough, Bathsheba had gone to his bedside and had David fill out the paperwork, or whatever you want to call it, to declare Solomon, their son, the next king to follow him. And then David died shortly thereafter.
Was that Bathsheba's child?
That was Bathsheba's second child. Remember, the first child, born of adultery, died. So Bathsheba's second child was Solomon. Correct. So you talk about, the forgiveness that God gives, even with that adulterous affair that David and Bathsheba had, and the murder that was perpetuated to cover it up, raises a child from her and David to be the next king. Yeah, pretty neat, eh? Yeah. Anything else? Okay, I got a question for you. You all staying for spaghetti supper? Or spaghetti lunch? Dinner?
Sure.
Yay! All right. All right. With that, we go on with our offering, and then I'll get down and pick up any prayer requests that you might have, and we'll go to our Lord.